All right. Again, I'm Kata. I'm with the Dragon Innovation team. I'm here with my colleague, Nate Deschaine, who's been with Dragon for 4 years. I'll let Nate introduce himself, but the topic we're going to be covering today pertains to setting production schedules and manufacturing schedules, which I know in advance of all of you launching Kickstarter campaigns is something that can be really, really useful to have some data points about what goes into that and how to set those appropriately so that your backers are happy, for lack of a better term. All right, so I will kick this over to Nate and we'll go from there. Thanks so much.
Great, thanks, Kata. As she said, I am Nate Deschaine. I'm the manager of engineering here at Dragon. I've been with Dragon for 4 years. Previously, I was at iRobot doing manufacturing, engineering, and design for about 7. So I have a little over a decade of experience in this kind of manufacturing realm. Been to China a good handful of times over the past 10 years. And would like to start talking about your schedules. Let's see if I can share. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Kind of just the general overview of kind of what the perception of a schedule is, and can everyone see? There we go. So, a lot of the times we see Kickstarter campaigns with the idea of kind of a manufacturing schedule that starts off with your idea, prototype through production, including your funding, and this is kind of what people think of your timelines being, and kind of the big heavy front end is your prototyping. Your crowdfunding has some time, and your manufacturing will go quite smoothly. When in fact it's along the lines of your idea conception is quite short. You come up with an idea. Prototyping takes some time. Crowdfunding prep, which a lot of you are in now, and it's great to see you in the hardware studio. Crowdfunding, again, is even smaller than what it was previously stated. And this is your manufacturing time. The letter from K to W takes generally about 12 to 18 months if you have a good preparation going into manufacturing. And a lot of the times our customers even take longer than that, depending on the level of complexity that goes into their manufacturing and product. Normally startups don't have the experience and know-how to watch out for the steps ahead to prepare properly for manufacturing. To kind of dive deeper into the schedule that I was just showing, this is the general overlay of an idealized schedule, where you're going from your idea conception all the way to delivery of the customer. Each of these steps and the weeks that are kind of laid out are, again, idealized, and generally it's never this clean. Once you get into the lower section of the EVT, DVT, PVT stages in the bottom right-hand corner, sometimes if there's a big snag in EVT, you might do an EVT2, DVT2, DVT3, and those types of iterations are going to happen naturally before you start your PVT and go into your mass production. You want to make sure that you're prepared fully before any of those steps, so you don't produce 10,000 faulty units.
Could you maybe walk through this? And I think there's some diversity of experience on the call, so maybe talk through what some of the acronyms mean and what goes into those.
Of course. So starting in the top left, idea conception is, obviously you're coming up with what the product is, starting to develop your business case, and then the P0s through P3 is your prototypes. So each level, P0 is, I'm trying to work out the functionality and basic technologies of my product. P1 through P3 are the iterations that create the steps between kind of your breadboards through your looks like, works like prototypes. So kind of at P3, that's where you should have a really complete polished product, where you're using prototyping parts like 3D printing, maybe some quick turn boards, and it should just look like a product at the end. And that's where you're going to start to look for a manufacturer at that point. So VQP is a vendor quoting package. We like to refer to as an RFQ, which is request for quote, where you'll find your contract manufacturer, whether that's in the US, overseas, anywhere in the world, depending on your manufacturing plan, strategy, and product. From there, you'll kind of go into your DFM, tooling, and overall production phases. DFM stands for Design for Manufacturing, where you'll work with the manufacturer to finalize your product based on their capabilities and their experience. So even if you have a very well-designed product with your plastic parts with full drafts and rounds, they tend to do some things differently. There's no defined handbook of how to do things. It's more general guidelines. So when you go to each manufacturer, they just kind of have their own flavor of doing things. Tooling is probably one of the longest lead times, besides component selection, but kind of the physical gait of actually cutting tools to produce plastic parts usually takes the longest. Between 35 to 60 days, depending on the size, quantity, and volume of your product. That's going to be the big thing there.
And are there ways to make that shorter, the tooling process?
Usually not. It's just it's a time thing. Removing steel can't really go any faster than an EDM process or CNC machining process of that actual hardened steel tool. So reducing that time isn't usually possible. And then heading down towards your EVT, that's kind of your engineering validation test. This is your first prototype build of your products. This can be kind of a mix of prototype parts and production parts, but this is kind of the first working prototype of your product, where you're really understanding, like, all right, did I kind of screw up any place along the way? After that, if there aren't any big snags, you'll move into DVT. This is for design validation and test. This is where you'll have test fixtures, assembly fixtures, and you'll have more validity to your product. You should have working prototypes that are testables, kind of sellable, but they probably won't be in the final colors, final textures.
And what goes in when we have 3 to 7 weeks on that slide? Mm-hmm. Why does it take 7 weeks to go from EVT to DVT?
Sure. So a lot of the time is spent into manufacturing your fixtures, either for test or assembly, as well as material procurement. So for your PCB, if you're ordering, say, 200 to 300 parts, 200 to 300 products, you're going to need all of the components for it. And sometimes the lead times for the electric components don't necessarily follow those timelines. So no matter what, you're going to be spot buying, because if a capacitor, which we've been seeing recently, those lead times have been pushed out to 52 weeks. So trying to spot buy in a market can be quite difficult sometimes.
And what's a spot buy?
Spot buy is just if you, for instance, go to DigiKey or Premier Farnell, you'll purchase those types of parts
in low quantities.
In low quantities at a obviously much higher price as well. But that spot buy does give you the ability to get those parts in a relatively short lead time. As your product progresses towards PVT, you've already kind of prepared for those builds earlier. So that's why kind of the short lead time or the number of weeks is reduced. So by the time you're at PVT, you have set up your production line and you're really stressing the production line at that point, where you're running product through that is actually sellable. So it's going to be lower yields, and that's where you're starting to run into your production pilot and production start. And the real difference between PVT through production start is your yields. Once you've come down to your AQLs, your acceptable quality limits that you've agreed upon with your contract manufacturer, that's when kind of production start really happens. But anything that you've basically produced from PVT through production start are sellable units. So, those are obviously quantities that can be counted towards, your actual production. Once you've started production, or finished it, I should say, X factory is kind of the product that you've purchased from the contract manufacturer that's landed on the dock. From there, it's going to go overland to any custom port, or if you're manufacturing domestically, it's going to go directly to a warehouse. If it's coming from China or any offshore facility, it's going to either need to go by air freight, depending on the product size and weight. That's probably going to be cost prohibitive. So shipment overseas takes between 5 and 7 weeks, again, depending on where it's coming from. But that is generally the most cost-sensitive way to ship something. And then, delivery to the customer is going to be dependent on your type of 3PL, your third-party logistics, whether that's direct to an Amazon warehouse or direct to customer, depending on where you want to ship to or how you want to ship. There are some logistics partners that will do freighting from Hong Kong ports and warehousing and direct fulfillment from there. It does cost a little bit more, but sometimes it's logistically less complicated that way, and there's less overhead for payments from to Amazon or someone like that. I think that's kind of a good overview. I know I went a little fast, but I kind of want to leave a lot of time for questions and answers. I don't know how to unmute everyone.
Let's figure out how we can drag this.
Oh, stop share.
Stop share. Okay, great. So I guess we will open it up for Q&A. And I think the way we've set this up, sorry guys, is we won't be able to, I'm not sure we're going to be able to verbally ask questions, but there is a Q&A box that hopefully you can all see. And, oh wait, maybe I can allow you to talk. Talking permitted. There we go. So I've now permitted you all to talk. So feel free to, if you would like to use the Q&A function to type questions, that's just fine. Or I think we should be able to take verbal questions if you would like to do so. Oh, and at this point I will stop the recording. So feel free to ask questions and they'll be considered off the record. Then I would very much like to thank Nate for his time today. Again, thank all of you for joining us. I hope this was useful to give you kind of that high overview for typical schedules for new product introductions. We have one additional question. Okay. So again, Nate, thank you so much for your time. Everyone who participated, really appreciate you joining us. I definitely welcome feedback. I'm not sure I said at the outset or if you all heard, but the webinars that kind of Dragon and Avnet will be doing are going to roughly be on a monthly basis as well. They will be more geared towards technical topics, whereas the Kickstarter webinars are more about having creators who've been through the process talk about some of their journey. So I think these will be nicely complementary sessions. But again, we're putting together kind of what an optimal schedule would look like, and if there are particular topics you guys would like to hear more about or go in more depth on, I would very much welcome your feedback. I believe you all have my email since you joined us today. So thank you again. Have a wonderful afternoon or evening, and happy holidays if we don't connect before then. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.